It is now my very great pleasure to introduce our 4 speakers for this evening. Our first speaker is Zara Mohammed. She is the youngest and first female Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain, and the 4th we have welcomed to the Synagogue's multi-faith Chanukkah celebration. Zara was previously the first woman to lead the Federation of Student Islamic Societies. She is a graduate in human rights law, and despite a demanding role as Secretary General, a consultant to the third sector. We are delighted and honored to welcome you to your first speaking engagement in a synagogue, and we hope it won't be the last. Our second, I'm going to introduce everybody if that's all right. Our second speaker is Barty Taylor, of great fame in this synagogue because your photograph appears in so much of our publicity over the years, where you appeared in a bright saffron sari, and today you're wearing the most beautiful silk purple sari. You were the first female Secretary General of the Hindu Forum of Britain and President of the Hindu Forum of Europe. Barty was also the first female Hindu representative on the European Council of Religious Leaders. We are really delighted to welcome you back to the synagogue's multi-faith Chanukkah celebration. Rabbi Jeff Berger received his ordination from the Judith Lady Montefiore College in 2009. He is a 2016 Fellow of the King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, and graduate of the Ariane de Rothschild and the Cambridge Coexist leadership programs. We are delighted and honored to welcome you, Rabbi Jeff, as one of the UK Jewish community's passionate interfaith advisors, advocates, and activists. Harriet Crabtree is the Executive Director at the Interfaith Network for the UK. The network advances public knowledge and mutual understanding of the teachings, traditions, and practices of the different faith communities in Britain in order to promote good relations between persons of different faiths. We hope that this synagogue, the LJS, can play its part, and we are delighted and honored to welcome you back to our multi-faith Hanukkah celebration. So I'd like to invite Zara first to come and speak.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Alex, and thank you all for this incredible invitation, and what a delight it is to be just even in this room. It's so wonderful, and I'd like to, on behalf of the Muslim Council Britain, wish you all a very blessed and happy Hanukkah. As Rabbi Alex introduced myself, 10 months ago, my life changed quite considerably, and I was elected the first female, the youngest, and by the accent you can probably tell, the first Scottish Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. And when I took on board this role, with all of my differences, my predecessors averaging on about 55 years old, I was elected at 29. I knew that I had to do things differently, and that I was also going to be facing challenges unlike my predecessors, but also being elected in a pandemic, sure made for some interesting problem solving. And I think what today really marks, and I know for all of us faith communities, when we have these very special occasions, particularly when we can't do them as we normally would, for Muslims, particularly at the start of the pandemic, we had the first ever on history in our lifetime, Ramadan at home. And for many of us, not being able to go to a place of worship was just not something we could really comprehend. And I really value all of us being able to be in this space together, Because although for some people these are just buildings, for many of us they symbolize so much more. And when we reflect even in our own tradition of Prophet Zechariah, and we think about his challenges, his tests, the endurance, the compassion, the kindness, but also a concept that we call tawakkul, which is reliance on God. I think it's in that same wave that we also overcame the challenges of this pandemic, and in that same light that we think about ourselves and we think about the change that we want to see in the society around us. Someone said to me, Zara, you know, if it wasn't for faith communities, some people would have been very hungry during this pandemic. A lot of people would have been left behind, because despite all the good that we have in our country, despite all of the services, there were many, many vulnerable people that had nowhere to go, no one to take them in. Thousands of international students that could not work, that didn't have any community to belong to, that couldn't get back home, the homeless, the poor, the elderly, the destitute. But we were there. You were there. Our faith communities were there. And we provided a light in a very dark moment in time. And I think that is what faith is really about. And the celebration that we're having today is also hearkening back to what all of our traditions teach us when it comes to overcoming challenges and difficulty. Being the youngest person in the organization and also the boss has made for a fair few challenges for me. And a lot of people say, how and why? How, I'd like to believe, is definitely to do a lot with a leap of faith, a trust, seeing my track record on the organization. But I think also a recognition within our own institutions and our religion and our religious communities that we have to do this work for the future. We have to make our institutions accessible, relevant for young people, for the ones that are coming after us. And I was delighted to attend COP26. You know, incredible to see the eco-synagogues and all the other faith communities, but the voices of faith communities were so loud. And someone said something beautiful. He said, we are only renting this earth from the future generations. We're only here to take care of it for them. And I think all of us have to take that forward now. And being a young leader, I absolutely make that very clear in every room that I'm in, which is to see a better world and to see a society where we can all be inclusive, where we can be accepting of our difference, is to understand how much more that means to the future generations, to the young people that we will hand it over to. And I really do hope that as we've all come together here, with all of our differences, our diversity, even amongst ourselves, that we're able to continue to champion that, because the young people, the challenges that they are facing, whether it's mental health, whether it's to do with, bullying online, hate crime, you name it, they're facing it. The planet, even bigger than that. We've seen so many heartbreaking stories in the past couple of weeks. Our own communities have been targeted, and I myself have to be ready to go on news at any moment to respond to any breaking story. That's a lot of pressure. So I think in these light moments of relief, where we can be together, and hopefully a lot longer, pending COVID's new variant, that we really do take strength in what God has given us, take strength in our faith, have courage to continue, have conviction to speak against injustice, intolerance, and hatred, but have a lot of love for one another. Because I know everyone in this room has these untold stories, has these pains and wounds that we may never ever share with one another. But we should all be just a little bit kinder, knowing that we may not know someone else's story, but we can certainly be there as a pillar of strength. So once again, I wish you all a very happy Hanukkah. And I really do pray that the blessings of this ceremony are accepted, and we'll continue our partnership and our friendship. Of course, your support in my journey is most welcome. It's terribly difficult. So any advice that you may have is definitely welcome. And I'm so fortunate and blessed to be here to speak with you all. So many esteemed guests and many other ladies of first that I hope to learn from. And thank you, Rabbi Alex, for such a wonderful introduction, and Steve as well for giving me some good notes for my speech. Thank you so much.
Wrapping up for the weather in a sari is not an easy thing to do. Okay, so I'm very lucky because this is my third visit to this synagogue, and I'd like to wish you all a happy Hanukkah for it. The Hindu community in the UK is not new. We were here in the reign of the first Elizabeth, in small numbers, but she paid a pirate to take us away because there was too many of us. And then we came as professionals and students, and you may know Mahatma Gandhi came here to study law in the UK. So we've been friends with the Jewish community for a long time as we came and went from the UK. But in India, we've been friends with the Jewish community for more than 2,000 years. And there are people who are Indian Jews. So, it's been a journey that we have taken together. And then we've also had the interfaith journey, because my faith, Sanatana Dharma, Hinduism, it teaches us to value all paths that lead a person to righteousness and spirituality. And as such, India has been a home to many, many different religions. Christians have been in India longer than they've been in Britain. So they have been our neighbors, and Muslims have been there for over 1,000 years and so on. So multi-faith is a way of living when you look at many Indians and Indian traditions. Light also plays a very significant part in Sanatana Dharma, Hinduism. Indeed, we recently celebrated Deepavali, or Diwali, which literally means a row of lights. But it's about 3 weeks ago, just over three and a half weeks ago, that we celebrated Diwali. So when Hanukkah comes and we light the candles, it does mean something special to me. And until November last year, I was a prison chaplain. And in that role, one of the things I used to do was to help Jewish prisoners who came every day during Hanukkah to light their candles. So it's a very special role to me. And I think I have a friend online, Jane, who does workshops on Judaism when I do workshops on Hinduism. And sometimes I used to get the special bread from her, and I would sneak it into the prison and I would give it to the Jewish prisoners. So things we try and do in order to make life a little bit more homely for people that we work with. We, as Hindus, often ask the Divine Spirit to always guide us in the right direction. And the flame is often compared to the light of the Lord, which resides in each one of us. With our own good karma and the divine light guiding us, we can always walk the right path. And we have a verse we recite from the Brihadanayaka Upanishad, which encompasses this, and that is, lead us from untruth, unreal, to the real, lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to eternal life. And we associate that with also the flame and the light of the divine. So on that note, I would like to wish you all a happy Hanukkah, and hopefully we will meet again at Diwali.
I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to be here to speak in this magnificent synagogue. Zechariah, whose name means the Lord remembers, was considered a prophet of restoration. He encouraged the civic leaders of his day, Zerubbabel and others, to persist in a project they'd begun but were struggling to complete, rebuilding the second Jewish temple, the first having been destroyed by the Babylonians only 70 years prior. Zechariah saw a vision of a golden, 7-branched candelabra fed directly with pure oil from 2 nearby olive trees, implying that God would provide the desperately needed resources for Zerubbabel to finish his work. Lo bechayil v'lo bekoach ki im beruchi amar Adonai Tzivaot. As you've heard already, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, said the Lord of hosts. This was a divine message to inspire hope in a traumatized, depressed remnant of a dispossessed people. Might, as you can understand, refers to collective force, like that of an army, and power implies individual strength. Zechariah's message was that to reestablish a home for the divine presence would require more than cleverness, more than ability, more than physical strength, both by the many and by the few, but people who were also inspired by the Spirit of God. And so is today any different? Our generation has great technology and brilliant minds trying to solve the toughest challenges of the planet. But what we've learned from the past nearly 21 months, whether it be about the pandemic or about climate change, is that it takes the Spirit of God working through divinely inspired people of all faiths and none to not only survive, but to grow and to thrive. So if we skip ahead a few hundred years from Zechariah to arrive at the Hanukkah story of Judah the Maccabee, as so eloquently described by Rabbi Alex, in 164 before the Common Era, it was a time when Greece, the dominant world power, sought to unite their crumbling empire by force. Confusing uniformity with unity, they insisted to try and unify the culture by eliminating all traces of minority, ethnicity, heritage, or difference. In this case, they prohibited the Judeans during the Second Temple period from practicing their faith tradition. And worse still, as was mentioned, they insinuated their foreign idols into the sacred space of the Jewish temple. To me, Chanukkah conveys a timeless, universal message of protecting the right to religious freedom. Perhaps this is why we still gather 2 millennia later to celebrate. Jews light a menorah on Chanukkah to commemorate the rededication of the desecrated temple. But I believe more widely, this introduces the concept of light, which was beautifully described by the 2 previous speakers, light into the darkest time of the Northern Hemisphere year, dispelling ignorance, and at the same time embracing and celebrating diversity, and hopefully welcoming Ruach Adonai, the Spirit of God. Let there be no doubt that Zechariah's prophecy still echoes in this beautiful sanctuary this evening, because each of us has the capability and the capacity to illuminate the world with a vision of hope. We too can be candles bringing light, wisdom, and inspiration. It is my prayer that we each be motivated from this evening's event to add our light at a time when the world is vulnerable, and in doing so, to help reawaken the spirit of God's presence, not only in ourselves, but in all those around us. Thank you.
A very, very happy Hanukkah to you all. Thank you, Rabbi Alexandra, and thank you to the congregation here and to Steve for bringing me here this evening. There are a few places that I'm happier to be back in, and it is so good to be back in person, as previous speakers have said. I bring greetings from the Interfaith Network for the UK, of which I'm the Executive Director. The Jewish community has been a long-standing and key part of that journey of the Interfaith Network since it was founded in 1987. The Board of Deputies takes part on behalf of all of the different groupings. And these have been hard times for the Jewish community, as they have for a number of others. The incident on Oxford Street is a reminder of that. And at this time, I think the message of the power of the Spirit of God and of the light is perhaps even more needed than at many other times. It reminds us that in all our communities, we have teachings which support us, which hold before us the positive message that justice will prevail. But they also bring the message, or have the message, I think, that we are all part of that story. We have to work for it to come about. And I think that the Interfaith Network, perhaps in my role there, I'm so conscious of many of the things where people find the interactions difficult. And we see around us all the profoundly tragic dimensions of the world. But I want to, at this time, at Chanukkah, bring us back to the positive. Zara spoke earlier about the light, in a sense, brought by faith communities during the pandemic. And it has been an amazing thing how the different faith groups have contributed. Individual people of faith volunteering. There's a spirit of altruism, kindness, and reaching out has been there. And that kind of light, that is light that is brought to our own communities and the wider world. All the speakers have raised significant kind of points, which I'm not going to comment on because I think this should be a very short reflection. And I'd like to end my reflection by, I think, reiterating my pleasure at being here, at this welcome, because this is the hospitality, this is the hopefulness, this is the kind of bright light that makes our lives better, that inspires us to carry on along the journey. So I thank you again for welcoming me to be with you this evening.